Good morning, everyone. How's it going? I'm Claire. This is the Beyond Tech Teams track, and this morning you're going to hear how HR can use Jira for onboarding. Nathan Oni from FAIR is going to be talking to you, and he has a long history in tech. We're sharing fun facts from all of our speakers, and he once was asked by Steve Jobs what looked good on the menu at Apple where he worked. And Nathan was eating the chicken. Steve told him that he was vegetarian, and that is one of his favorite memories of working in tech. So without further ado, let's all welcome Nathan to the stage.
Cool. So, boop, 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 boop. See, not lying. Me and Ali. That worked through it. So, essentially, yeah. After talking to a lot of people at Fair, I realized that there were a lot of opportunities to work with Jira and Confluence. So, like I was mentioning, not too long ago, we were doing onboarding, very piecemeal, email, chat. People were coming, running around the office, talking to each other about what they wanted to do. And the process was super disjointed. A lot of people throughout the company would come physically to the IT team office and tell people what they needed. They would go to the HR team, said, hey, I have a guy starting yesterday, and we need all this stuff set up for him, which is, it can be common in any sort of environment, but what we wanted to do was make it a little bit more streamlined. So the fact that the number of users on Atlassian apps that we have at the company nearly quadrupled in around the last year, we realized that we needed to use a system, and Jira and Confluence seemed like it was going to be a good fit for that. So basically, we use them in tandem to create and manage the 14 types of new hires that we would onboard at Fair. And there are around 55 checklist items needed from our HR team, some more, some less, depending on what type of hire was going through the process. So what I'm going to present is a step-by-step overview of the process, and we're going to go through things in detail. Then I'll open up for a little bit of Q&A. So like I said, when I started at Fair, just around a year ago, a little bit shy of a year ago, April 30th of 2018, there were under 200 users at the company. So I was employee number 185 at Fair. And now we have over 830, not just employees, but independent contractors and vendors as well. Nonetheless, each and every person who's onboarded with Fair gets Jira and Confluence. And a lot of the teams that are in customer service really utilize those apps. So about half of that 830 total are people in 3 of our call centers across the US, and each and every one of them use Jira Service Desk, Jira, and Confluence. And that's huge. All of our employees really enjoy using the ticketing portals that we've set up with them. And the vehicle operations team, data science and experimentation, business intelligence, and other teams use Jira projects. And all teams across the company, including marketing, legal, HR, product, IT, and customer service, all use Atlassian products. So a lot of companies, some people use them for certain things, others use them for others. At Fair, everyone gets Atlassian apps when they're onboarded, and a lot of our teams who are customer service are really heavily based using that stuff. So when users come on board, not only do they need access to systems from IT, but they need stuff like HR benefits information, the life information that they get, the stock options, different things, 401k, and et cetera. So our HR team is pretty on top of getting that stuff sorted out. However, when I started, it was a little bit messier, and a lot of those things were coming in piecemeal from messages from one email and one Slack message to the next. So we decided there needed to be a meeting to discuss the madness that was our onboarding experience at Fair. So the executive team knew the company was going to continue to grow, and they wanted to come up with a plan. So part of that was bringing in someone that was an expert with Jira applications to go through things that would help us at scale. So the company knew that it was going to keep growing, and the people in our IT teams are the company teams at Fair that control HR onboarding. So essentially, they brought me on to help administer Atlassian apps, and then my IT teammates and I met with everyone in the people team. So the people team at Fair includes the people and culture, HR, and recruiting team. So about 12 of us sat in a room, and then we really kind of talked through our pain points of everything that we wanted to go through and things that weren't working. For example, the recruiting team felt like when they had someone hired, the HR team really wasn't in sync with what they wanted to do. And the IT team, we really felt that we got information extremely late in the process. So whenever someone had brought on board, a lot of times the IT team didn't have systems set up, didn't have a computer ready for the user. And that made us a little bit frustrated because we wanted to be on top of everything. We really wanted to give everyone the best experience in day one. And there were a lot of roadblocks in doing that. So in this process, what we did is, we tried to summarize the points people had, and we tried to see what uses Jira and Confluence would have for these to be really, really great items. So a little bit of background information. So the person who onboarded Atlassian apps at Fair is actually our head of our legal department, which was kind of interesting. So she built out a huge Confluence space at her previous company, and she actually administered Jira at her previous company too. So previously to me coming on board at Fair, the legal director set up stuff in Atlassian, but it wasn't really built out. So what we wanted to do in this meeting is to start with building out one project and get everything rolled out. So we knew that the products from Atlassian would be a good source for project management and knowledge base for what we wanted to do. So we brainstormed, and we brainstormed the evolution of the onboarding workflow at Fair and the steps that we felt needed to be part of the process. We talked through each and every step of the process, no matter how painstaking it was, and we made sure that at least after we left the meeting that we're on page with what needed to get fixed and certain things that were working okay, which a lot of stuff wasn't really necessarily working okay at the time. So we wanted to make sure that we had all the information that we needed on the IT team to get users up and running. So we brainstormed so hard that it hurt, and then the plan started to form in my head for what we needed to do for the project. The most important part of creating any project, I feel, is planning. You really can't plan enough, and I've seen a lot of times where people, they're just like, oh, let's make a Jira project, let's get it going right now, and they don't have really anything decided what they want to do. They think they can just create it. Okay, we have an IT team that's going to help us. We'll get our HR onboarding set up in one day. Doesn't really work like that. So planning. I can't stress that enough. We as a team had to decide what steps were vital in the onboarding process versus which steps weren't needed whatsoever. So we evaluated the options that were needed versus what were not. And we looked into the parts of the process that were the most manual and tried to automate each step that we went through. So I asked numerous questions of the people operations managers, who are two people who do a lot of work for our company. Essentially, the people ops managers are the ones that work with all the onboarding and everyone incoming at Fair. So the two of those guys were pretty awesome, and they were really slammed with a lot of work. So I did a lot of back and forth with them and asked them a lot of questions about stuff that they needed. So essentially, we know that after a candidate agrees to be hired, there are several steps to follow the onboarding process with them. So after a candidate agrees, the final step in the process is to actually onboard them. So what we're going to go through in the next series of slides is a little bit more detailed outbreak of what the steps are that are needed to onboard a team member. So what we did at Fair is we tried our best, our absolute best, to try to fit them all into this process. So the project that we created, it's the name that you see up top there, is People Lifecycle. As Fair, we like to think that our people, our Fair family, are folks that are really going to stay with us and people that we can all be part of the process of growing a startup with. So the path starts with our recruiting team during this process and Greenhouse, which is the recruiting software that we use that's widely used throughout the tech industry. The data is submitted in Greenhouse when a candidate is referred or applies to work at Fair. So essentially what happens at Fair is when the data in Greenhouse is verified, the people ops managers take a look at it, they make sure that there's nothing overlooked or there are no mistakes, and then they send it to Namely. Namely is our HR admin software system that we use at Fair. I think it's, anyone work from Namely here? Yeah? Oh, you have Namely. I just think it's a funny word, but Namely is a good product. I like it versus using some other systems that I've used in the past. So after the information is verified in Namely to be correct by the same team, the people ops team, a Jira ticket is then created, and then after the Jira ticket is created, what happens is a type form is sent to the hiring manager. So anyone here use Typeform? A few people? Yeah? Claire? Awesome. So Typeform is pretty cool because what it does, it's like a Google form and it applies logic to what people want to do. So essentially, it'll go through that with the steps of onboarding for the hiring manager. And so after everything goes into the Typeform, that actually populates into our Jira ticket, which also in tandem makes a Confluence page for the user. So with everything being on cloud, one of the concerns with security is who has access to look at this. In Confluence, we make sure that the pages are locked and they're specific to the hiring manager HR representatives, and the IT team who needs to work on that step of the process. So once all those details are gathered, everything is cataloged, and we get started with the process. So we'll go in depth each step of the process. So like I said, greenhouse to namely. So when a candidate applies, they're tracking greenhouse from the time that they're started. So even if you're an interviewer, hiring manager, work on the recruiting team, greenhouse has a lot of information that you fill out during the recruiting process of a candidate. Obviously, a lot of the candidates don't necessarily make it to the next step. However, when they do make it to the next step, what happens at FAIR is the greenhouse data is then pushed into Namely, which Namely is our HR onboarding software, and the people operations team, they comb the information that's in Namely. They make sure that everything is set up and that they make sure that all the details aren't overlooked for the candidates. So then what, like I said before, is we actually send out a type form to the manager through the Jira ticket, where we send out a secondary type form to the candidate as well. So the reason we started sending them out to the candidate, because things like their t-shirt size, their preferred computer, some roles require the user to have a very beefy computer, but a lot of the users don't want to use a Mac. A Mac is a standard that we have at the company, but if someone wants to use a high-powered PC, we want to make sure we know that from the start and we're not setting them up only to have them come back to us and want to change what they went through. So everything is cataloged through Typeform, and it's a pretty cool form because it has funny GIFs and pieces of information in there that the candidates can go through. So what we did that was a little bit custom in Jira is we made issue types out of each type of hire that we go through with FAIR. So the person who the people ops managers report to is our VP of HR. So I worked very closely with her just to make sure that everything here seemed copacetic and that we had the different types of hires that we had. So a few examples of those hires are staff full-time salary with no E-Verify, staff full-time salary with E-Verify, independent contractor, vendor, and a big one for us in California, we do have a lot of people that start as vendors, contractors, or temps that are converted to full-time employees. And we felt like before, a lot of those users were falling through the cracks. So we made sure we had an issue type to identify then. And an example, last week, we actually have a gentleman who was hired. He's our Director of Enterprise Solutions. He'd been a long-time contractor with the company, but what we did is we created a Jira ticket to officially get him in our system, catalog everything that he needed through that process. So like I mentioned before, all the new team members on onboarding are linked with a Confluence space. So actually, it's a space that has a page within it. So the page has the specific details for the user. So when we enter those details from the type form, when everything is cataloged, it's automatically through a script runner plugin that one of my teammates worked on with me, pushed to Confluence. So we have a space that's handy dandy and created for that user there. And so this, what we're looking at now, is the actual create screen. So after a team member type is selected, our HR people ops team will go through and fill out everything here. So essentially, they'll fill out the title, Enterprise Solutions Manager, what I mentioned before, for example. The hiring manager will be pinged on that ticket. We actually use the user picker, as it says, with start typing a list for selections there. The department, the start date, the end date, if it's known for contractors. End date is something that usually is known from the start with some of our contractors, but not all of them. We want to get that in there if it's known. Their personal email, phone, and if relocation is needed, and a few other details as well. So something I actually was conversing with some Atlassian folks about yesterday is the hiring manager user picker. It actually only lets the hiring manager and those who have access to the project look at this. So the security risk isn't necessarily there. So people who are the hiring managers, they can get a notification from Jira once someone is hired, and they're actually notified through each step of the process as being watchers. So no one else other than the HR reps needed and the IT team have access to look at the information for the users. And so this is actually the edit screen in the project. So once it's created, the HR team will have a myriad of these options. And like what I mentioned previous, it's about 55 different options. So depending on which of the 14 types of hires are selected, this will populate with a numerous amount of them. So some of them it's as little as 20 or so. Some it's a full 50 plus for all the users who need to get onboarded. So essentially, this is stuff that the HR team works on throughout the beginning of the first week. So information such as their last day, if it's known, stock information, background checks, 401k holdings, different things like that go through this. And all of those, if you want to take a photo of it or what we go through with FAIR. And so after the issue is created, it starts the journey throughout the Kanban board. So this is the workflow for the people lifecycle Kanban board. So essentially what we do is we start with awaiting onboarding details. And in awaiting onboarding details, essentially once someone gets hired, they're actually set to that status, and that's when the IT team is notified, and we're aware that that person's systems need to get worked on. Once we start working on everything, we put it to system setup in progress, and as we set up their email, their access to the SSO and whatever other apps they may need, we continue to work on that, and once it's complete, we put it to system setup complete. At that point, the HR team is notified, and they're actually working on the process throughout the week. So all those checklist items in the previous slide, it usually takes them about the first to second week of that person's start to get everything going. So essentially, they're working on it, they're cataloging on that information while it's getting all put into Confluence as well. And they want to make sure that those users have a great experience. So a lot of times in the past, the HR managers would go back and forth with the new hires and really ask them a lot of this information. Sometimes, for me, for example, they asked me twice to photograph my social security card and ID. I'm like, I've already given this to you, but they didn't really have a way to track it. This was something that helped at least a little bit for them get a little bit more organized in terms of what they needed to do for that part of the process. So in terms of the first 4 steps, which I outlined there, that's for onboarding. Now, we hope that everyone stays with us at our FAIR family for as long as humanly possible. However, we know that's not realistic. Sometimes a fit might not work out with the person. Sometimes teams expand and contract. So when in the event, there is an event that the person is caused to leave the company, we want to make sure that offboarding is handled very well and very securely in an organized manner too. So essentially here, these are the 2 statuses that we have for offboard. So if there's a known date for someone leaving the company, we will instantly put it to pending offboard. So that essentially means, for example, we know that the contractor has an end date that's 3 months from now. We'll put the date in the item so everyone's aware, and we actually use a calendar to show that information as well in Confluence so that the users will know and the managers will know when that person's offboarding is to be completed. Now, if someone puts in their 2-week notice or 1-week notice, which sometimes happens, they'll also be in the pending offboard status if that date is known. But in the unfortunate event that there are involuntary terminations with the company, we won't necessarily know, and we won't necessarily have a pending offboard date until that moment in time, and then they'll be moved to that status. Once the pending offboard stuff is delegated, we'll go through and we'll do offboard complete. So what the offboard complete is, everyone that at this time when I took the screenshot, there are about 130 people in the system that have been systematically offboarded with FAIR. And that's something that's updated each time someone moves on from the company. So you're looking at an actual live posting for one of our roles. What I thought would be great is let's go through a scenario and let's try to hire someone. So this is for my team, support engineer based out of Santa Monica. This is actually a live posting from Greenhouse. So we are looking for someone. If anyone's looking for work, let me know. Find me after this. We're looking for someone qualified. This guy in the A's hat here might be one of them. But this is, our rec. So you can click the button to apply, take a look at what the job entails. And right now, gosh, we have at least 30 or so engineering type of recs that are open with FAIR. And we have a lot of different recs open all over the place. So the recruiting team is mainly based out of Santa Monica, but we have another satellite office in Phoenix where recruiting is based. Once everything gets through in Greenhouse, our recruiting team is awesome. They're on top of making sure all those details are minded. And say, for example, we do have someone apply, they'll reach out to us. And say that we're one of the hiring people in Greenhouse, say that I'm a hiring manager for this role, for example, I'll instantly get notified through Greenhouse, and they'll let me know that we have someone coming. So this is kind of where the basketball question comes into hand. An app is received from LeBron James. After a very disappointing first season with the Lakers, LeBron, though he was injured and didn't play throughout the last week, the NBA season ended 2 days ago, and LeBron is looking for some things to do to occupy his time. So he actually thought doing an IT support role might be something up his alley. During the interview process, we checked with the then president of basketball operations, Magic Johnson, before he stepped down a couple days ago in a very, very emotional, very, very tearful speech about the logistics of LeBron working with us. Because if someone comes on board, we want to make sure they don't have any conflicts. We want to make sure with this guy here, he has a full-time regular job. We want to make sure that that doesn't get in the way if he's looking to do other work to offset that. So it looks like Magic was cool with him going for it. Doesn't care now because he's not with the Lakers anymore. And it appears to be a fit. So we go ahead and get LeBron hired in our system. So LeBron actually wanted to be an independent contractor. So he knew what that entailed. So essentially, he knew that he needed to provide his own insurance. He's okay with that. His regular job helps with that. He knew that there were different things like benefits that he wouldn't be allowed to get through the process with FAIR. But ultimately, he wanted to make sure that he was going to be able to contribute and work with the team. So it looked like it was going to be a fit. We hired him. I interviewed him. He did pretty well. You could say it was a slam dunk. So he agreed to start the day after the NBA regular season ended, which was a couple days ago, so not to miss a moment of productivity. So after he's transitioned from awaiting onboarding details, like I mentioned in the workflow, he goes through the same steps as anyone else in the FAIR family. So this is what the ticket screen will look like once it's filled out. The title is Support Engineer, the department, Corporate Engineering, working with me. The personal email is lbj@Lakers. He doesn't need a reload because he's already in LA. I'm the hiring manager, and this is essentially what the ticket will look like for any of our users at FAIR. So when anyone comes on board, the People Ops team is pretty savvy with Jira. I can tell you at the start of this process, it was a little bit of an uphill battle with them. Neither of them had ever really used Jira at all. So sometimes I spent an hour or more with the two guys in People Ops just going through the scenarios and trying to make sure that everything works. So a lot of this is credit to them. A lot of it is based off their feedback. I actually developed and adapted what needed to be done with the project. So our teams work very closely to get all this stuff done. And this is going to be a little bit of a demo of what the process is like once someone is on board. So you see LeBron starts in awaiting onboarding details. And as soon as we get ready to get him set up, we'll move the ticket to system setup and progress, which is the first part of the status. So while we're setting everything up, we'll continue to keep it in that status with the IT team. And once the setup is complete, we'll move it to system setup complete. That automatically notifies HR that all is set up with LeBron. After that, then the next status is onboard complete. So LeBron can join Lonzo, Kuzma, Rondo, McGee, and the rest of the starters for the current Los Angeles Lakers. Well, current as of last week or so. We'll see what happens in the offseason. And then LeBron, since we know he's a contractor and we know his offboard date, he's moved to pending offboard once the HRT team moves everything over. So what I want to highlight here is it looks like the start date listed is 4/10, but the actual date up top is 4/12, which is what we thought we were going to hire. I bring this up. It's not a mistake. We constantly have a lot of back and forth with candidates at FAIR. It's a pretty fast-paced company, so sometimes we want to get people in really fast. LeBron in particular, he wasn't happy with how the season panned out, so he wanted to start a little bit before when he originally planned to. But this happens pretty standard, so sometimes there's a disagreement. Usually we'll go back and shore it up. But the information that was pushed to Confluence shows a different date. That's fine. You see the red lock up top and the green dot around it. That essentially means that only the people that have access can take a look at that ticket. So the information that I mentioned previous is in the ticket as well as his end date. So he wants to do a little bit of IT work during summer camp, but he wants to end his contract with FAIR at the 3rd of July before the 4th because he likes fireworks. So his t-shirt size, XXX, same as me. We got those in stock. You're cool. Preferred name, LeBron. Doesn't like any other nicknames. That's cool with us. So the computer preference, he just wanted the biggest and strongest. So we got him the 15-inch MVP. And the fun fact is he can dance. He can dance. So that really goes through the end of the project and everything that we do in detail for a hire. So a lot of this was really streamlined through the process of feedback, going back and forth with hiring managers and everyone else involved. So at first, we had a really, really messy project. We had a lot of things that weren't showing up, and we had a lot of details that we didn't find out. So through a few months of rigorous testing and back and forth, we were able to hire a dancing LeBron, but also streamline the process for what we were working on as well. And that's magic. It really is. So we had a lot of frustration setting up our call centers, essentially. So we started getting hires in batches of about 20 or 30 people at a time. And so there were no external call centers when I started at Fair around a year ago, but now we have two pretty large ones with each over 200 people, and the Phoenix office actually hired a couple hundred call center folks as well. So we wanted to make sure that we got everything done with those folks. And that situation is a little bit tricky for us because those hires were essentially vendors, and those people weren't using our hardware, but they were using our software. So just one other story is that, everyone at those centers, they have access to Atlassian apps too. So say, for example, a customer service advocate is working with someone that has a problem with their fare car. Say that, they're going down the road, pop a tire, they give us a call or chat us in the Fare app or send us an email. The customer service person has a portal set up so they can actually reach out to the support team to talk about anything that they need. So not only do we use Jira for HR team, but we use it really widely throughout the company. Even people with vendors have licenses to get that set up. So the process of doing this has been pretty cool and pretty amazing. So essentially, in my concluding notes, what I'll say is using effective tools is vital to any process in a fast-moving organization. And it's sink or swim. If you don't get this stuff done and you don't get your people on board, they're physically not able to work. And that's something that we could not abide by. So 3 key things that you can do that you can take home today are use Jira to organize your HR onboarding, use Confluence as a knowledge base for your new hire onboarding, and finally, use Jira and Confluence as a cross-functional communication across your organization. I think that piece right there is the most important because all the back and forth, all the Slack messages, emails, in-person chat, people coming back and forth to ask me questions about their users all the time. That still does happen, but it happens a lot less now than it did originally. So a lot of this was, yes, I constructed some of it, but a lot of it was groupthink by the people on the people and HR teams at Fair. So I'll credit the company for really coming up with great solutions and continuously working to make sure everything was a fit for this process. So a little bit more about us. So like I said, we're an automotive user startup. So Fair likes to think it's arguably the most innovative automotive finance thing since the lease for the car. Their words, not mine. But it's a flexible, end-to-end, no-term contract that you can do with your car. Fair.com is us. Check it out. That's the information that I have, and I wanted to devote some time for questions and answers. And Claire does have a microphone. If anyone has any questions, let us know.